Could Ebou Adams be set to be replaced at Derby County? Now, obviously, he picked up a suspension in their most recent game up against Norwich City, and that opened the door for a player by the name of Bobby Clark. Now, Bobby Clark on Saturday up against QPR put in one of the best midfielder performances that I have seen at Derby County in a very, very long time. Now, don't get me wrong, there is always room for improvement, but I certainly believe that Bobby Clark showed Derby County a different side to central midfield than what they've been seeing in recent years with Ebou Adams. Now, you can let me know your thoughts on this down in the comments, and if you have not done so already, make sure you hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and turn on that notification bell. But shall we get into it? If you have not done so already, check out the links down in the description. We're trying to hit 50 subscribers on the gaming channel so that I can live stream FC, Football Manager, and all things like that. So make sure you go and subscribe over there, and I'll catch you in one of the live streams soon. Now, Ebou Adams has been a staple of the Derby County team since he signed back in January in League One, and it was a massive move for Ebou Adams at the time, who hadn't really been playing at Cardiff City and ultimately had picked up a few injuries, which ultimately cost him a lot of game time and ultimately his position in that Cardiff City squad. Now, he then went on to join Derby County on a permanent transfer, but over the course of last season and heading into this one, there has been doubts over his future at Derby County, with clubs being interested in the Championship and also Derby County bringing in a range of central midfielders. What will happen to the Gambian midfielder? Now, obviously, the introduction of Bobby Clark on Saturday was a huge move by John Eustace, and one which, in my opinion, was an absolutely massive one in the respect of what Derby County are trying to do going forward. Now, John Eustace was keen to point out towards the back end of his press conference this weekend that having Bobby Clark in there gave the opportunity for Derby County to step up more. It gave them the opportunity to play a little bit more because ultimately he has that technical ability, he has that composure. Realistically, it's a big reminder of what Harrison Armstrong used to offer Derby County when we had him last season. And for me, I really like Bobby Clark. I think he's a very, very talented midfielder. I would have dropped a video about him earlier on this week, and I just do believe that he has the quality to really take over Derby County. And if we give him the opportunity to, I think he can be absolutely phenomenal in that central midfield role. Now, I've spoke a few times about Bobby Clark and how I sort of see him as sort of like a Mason Mount vibe player, and I certainly believe that to be the case, even more so after seeing him in central midfield on Saturday. And ultimately, that is where this sort of thought process comes to discuss Ebou Adams and his potential replacement being that of Bobby Clark. Now, obviously, there's a huge amount of discussions that can be had in regards to Bobby Clark and in regards to Ebou Adams as well about the positives and negatives of having them in the side. And I certainly do believe that both players offer something completely different to each other. So maybe Bobby Clark wouldn't be the replacement for Ebou Adams. Maybe he'd be the replacement for a David Ozo. Now, obviously, with that suspension coming into effect at the weekend and Ebou Adams not being involved, it sort of gave Bobby Clark the freedom to sort of go and take that shirt. And in my personal opinion, I believe he absolutely has taken the shirt 100 million %, because he was unbelievably good on Saturday, and I just felt as if he offered exactly what Derby County needed in that midfield role. Now, don't get me wrong, there's always the discussion point where you can sort of say that Ebou Adams coming back in, it gives you a little bit more defensive stability, a little bit more of an experienced mind. Yes, you lose a little bit of that technique and you lose a little bit of that composure, but it opens up the door for a little bit more of a player who can have an impact in that defensive standpoint. Now, obviously, for Derby County, yes, you've got to think about both ends of the pitch. You've got to think about the opposition box and you've got to think about your box. You've got to think about what you can do to keep them out of the way, and you've got to think about what you can do to get yourself in their way, essentially, to create chances. And that is something which it's always difficult to sort of get a balance on. Now, for me, I don't know what you guys think, but I felt that on Saturday, with Ebou Adams not in the side, with David Ozo and Bobby Clark in central midfield, I felt like the balance in midfield was absolutely perfect. It was the perfect mix of defensiveness and attacking ability, and I felt like Bobby Clark even helped out massively in terms of pressing in the final third, in my personal opinion, because he was able to step up and he was comfortable being in that position. Whereas I sometimes feel like you put Ebou Adams a little bit further forward forward, to be involved in that pressure. And I don't necessarily think he feels comfortable being that far up the pitch and sort of being bypassed over plenty of occasions. Now, obviously, over the course of the last year or so, Derby County's midfield has been bypassed on both ends, from our own players and from other teams being able to go straight through us, essentially. And it has been really interesting to watch how that has developed over the course of the last 12 months, essentially, where it felt like today we was really trying to develop that midfield sort of fight, essentially, where David Ozo was getting on the ball and trying to make things move, and then Bobby Clark was doing the same thing. And then ultimately it opens up those opportunities for players like Patrick Adjimang, Ben Brereton Diaz, Carlton Morris to break into the opposition box. And there was many occasions today, I say today because I'm recording this on Saturday evening, where we had that opportunity to play a channel ball. We had the opportunity to get the ball out wide to Diaz or Adjimang on whatever side. And I just think that's absolutely massive for me, because you can't take away the importance of that, essentially, of putting the ball in the channels, spinning defenders. It is so important, but ultimately in today's game I don't think we see it enough. And I think a reintroduction of a player like Patrick Adjimang and potentially a Corey Blackett-Taylor, you've got that opportunity then to stand a man up and go, and you've got the opportunity not just to stand a man and go, but also to be able to have that opportunity to have the ball played into feet and just knock it and go, knock it and run, literally spin your man and off you fuck. And that is exactly, in my opinion, what Derby County have needed for years upon years upon years. And don't get me wrong, I think Mendez-Ang was brilliant at the stop and go type moves. Kane Wilson was brilliant at attacking his man. But we haven't had those proper channel runners in donkey's years. And I think, realistically, I think Patrick Adjimang could be the perfect channel runner. He's big, he's stocky, and he can cause problems for any defence. But ultimately, we've got to give him that opportunity to prove that he can do that. And so far for me, I don't quite think we've seen enough of it from him. We've certainly seen that he can stand his man up, and he's not afraid to do a couple of skill moves and take it past his man, or at least try to. But ultimately, he's got to be a bit more consistent with it. And he's got to find a skill move that works perfectly, rather than the sort of trying this, that and the other, because that ultimately for me is where it gets a little bit difficult. Now, obviously, there's a lot of changes that can happen for Derby County over the course of the next week or so as we head towards Sheffield United. But ultimately, a big 3 points headed Derby County's way on Saturday, a big 3 points on Tuesday as well. And we're heading towards a huge game now against Sheffield United, who are still languishing down there in the relegation zone, where Derby County could find themselves really close to the playoff positions, heading into, 3 games in a week before the international break. And for me, that is absolutely massive. If Derby County can find themselves within that sort of touching distance of the playoff positions, it will feel very similar to how it did heading into 9 or 10 games last season for me, where Paul Warren had us starting really, really well. I think we was on 12 or 13 points after 7 or 8 games, right on the edge of the playoffs, and then it capitulated when David Ozo got injured. But is the change, bringing in Bobby Clark, going to be the one that makes sense? You can let me know your thoughts on it down in the comments. For me, I'd put Bobby Clark in midfield. What would you do?